Okay, in the second example, again we are going to find an inverse. So to find an inverse, we have two steps here. We switch the x and the y variables, and then we solve for y. Okay? So, in our second example, again, f of x is really, this is just the same as y. And actually, let's graph this thing first. So, let's graph this the old-fashioned way. Let's just plot some points. So, we want to find our vertex, and vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So there is nothing added or subtracted on the x before it's being squared, so your vertex here is the point 0, because h is 0, and your k is 2. So we have put our vertex in the middle of our chart. Now we need a couple smaller values and a couple larger values. So if we plug -1 in, -1 squared is 1 plus 2, that gets you a 3. Plug -2 in here, -2 squared is 4 plus 2 is 6. Now using symmetry, 1 should be the same as -1, and 2 should be the same as -2. So now we've got our points. We can now plot these. So 0, 1, 2. We can go -1, 1, 2, 3. Positive 1's also at 3. -2 is up at 6. And positive 2 is also up at 6. So here's the graph of the original parabola. Okay, that's the original quadratic. Now I want to find the inverse. So again, let's switch our x and our y. So this is going to be x equals y squared plus 2. So here, we now want to solve for y. We need to get y by itself, so we need to bring the values over. So you get rid of adding and subtracting before the exponent. So we're going to subtract the 2. And now to undo a square, you take the square root. So y equals the square root of x minus 2. But that's not totally correct. Because if you remember, from the last unit on square roots, x squared equals 9. X is equal to 3, but 3 is not your only answer. Because 3 squared gets you 9, but also -3 squared gets you 9. So when you take the square root of both sides, you have two cases, a positive and a negative. So down here, when we take the square root of both sides, we have a positive square root and a negative square root. So this represents the inverse of this function, and let's verify that. Let's make a table of values. Okay. In this table of values, remember your y values become your x values, and your x values become your y values. Well, if we notice here, we've got some repeated y values, so we don't need to use all of these. So let's just start with the smallest one. Let's start with 2. We have a y of 2, we have a y of 3, that occurs twice, and then we have a y of 6, and that occurs twice. Okay, so we have 3 x values. From these 3 x values, we're going to end up having to get 5 different y values. Well, let's see how that occurs. When you plug the 2 into your inverse function, you get 2 minus 2, which is 0. Square root of 0 is 0, but you can't have a positive or a negative 0. 0 is just 0, so this is the point 2, 0. Now let's plug in the 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1, but positive 1 and negative 1 are two different values. So this could be the point 3 positive 1 or the 3 negative 1. Now let's plug it in the 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. But then you can have positive 2 or negative 2. Okay? Well, if we analyze this table compared to this table, are they really opposites? Well, this table takes a -2 and turns it into a 6. Well, does this table take a 6 and turn it into a -2? It does. But it also takes, if you take a 2 and it turns into a 6, well, this turns into a positive 2 as well. See how this 6 came from a negative or positive 2? So this 6 has to give you the positive or negative 2. The same is true with the 1 and negative 1. Negative 1 and 1 both give you 3's. Well, the 3 gives you both positive and negative 1. And then the 0 got you a 2, so the 2 gets you a 0. So you can see these are truly inverse values. So if we plot these points, you get 2, 0. At 3, you have a point at positive 1, and you also have another point down here at negative 1. At x is 6, you have a point at positive 2, but you also have a point down here at negative 2. And here you'll see that this ends up being a sideways parabola. This parabola just got turned around and now it's going sideways. Okay. Now, remember this plus or minus? Well, the plus here is making the y values positive. So the positive y values here are when the graph is moving up. So this is the positive part of that square root function. The negative square root are the y values that are negative here, so that's the part that's going down. So when you have a plus or minus the square root, the top part here is your positive square root. The bottom part is the negative square root. It actually graphs as two pieces. Okay? And we'll be exploring this in much more depth when we do the examples on the next slide.